Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm chuckling because I meant to hit the record button and I didn't. See, we're all human. We make mistakes. But as I was saying to myself and my guest, Bill Toti, that I am so blessed to live in the great state of Montana because there's a lot of things that I take pleasure in. But one of them is getting to know our veterans. And Montana is home to the most conglomerate of veterans in the United States, is what my understanding is. And I live in the northwestern part of the state, which has a huge contingency of veterans. And I've gotten to know several, John Fuller being one of them, who's a retired Army. He's in his late 70s now, and he's in our state legislature. But, you know, John's full of stories. He's the politician known for giving you a history lesson. But I've also, through John, gotten to know other people in this area, such as the Valor Equine Society. And basically what that is it's a group of people that work with horse therapy and our veterans. And it's been amazing to be a part of what they're doing and watch the wonderful work of the team and the veterans come through the program. So if you're up here and you're looking or wanting to be a part of something, look into the Valor Equine Society. Now, if you've listened to my show long enough, which is over 3 years now, you will know that I've had several great veterans on, all the way back to Travis Mills. He was the first quadriplegic injured veteran, I'm trying to get this all out of my mouth here, that had all his limbs replaced by the military. Travis Mills, episode 16. Phil Downs, episode 20. John Fuller, who I've just mentioned from Army, episode 121. And the great Al Oshesky, episode number 122, who was in the Air Force. He's a orthopedic surgeon. So I've had a lot of wonderful vets. And today I've got Bill here. So Bill, thank you for the time. And I appreciate your service. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jim, for having me.
Yeah, as I said, when I saw veteran in your bio, it was an easy yes. Now you get to do the hard work and explain to us why we said yes, but I know you've got a book out and you've served. So maybe you could walk us through a little bit of a history lesson with who you are and where you're at today and what the book entails.
Sure thing. Well, I actually spent 26 years on active duty. I was a submariner. I made 7 deployments over the course of my career. That's a lot, right? Hard on the family. But when I was looking to leave the military, I realized I was approaching a point in my life where if I didn't transition to industry soon, I wasn't going to be able to have a full, let's say, 20-year second career. I was in my mid-40s, and I saw that window closing. And, you know, it occurred to me that if I wanted to join a company that was going to invest in me, I needed to kind of do it soon. So I made the transition to industry, assuming it would be easy. I was, as every veteran goes through this transition training called Transition Assistance Program, I learned the hard way after transitioning to industry that almost everything they told me was wrong. And I refer to in the book, the great lie that was the first thing that set me up for failure. And so over the course of 15 years from that initial transition into industry, I made a bunch of mistakes that were, you know, avoidable, and then corrected my trajectory, eventually ending up as CEO of a defense company. And as CEO, I hired as many veterans as I could, but I watched them make the same mistakes that I was making. And that's what really caused me to understand that the problems were structural. It was with the training the military gives you when you leave the service, which is almost universally disliked because it's so ineffective. The law requires the military to give you training. The law doesn't require it to be effective training. And so what it ends up being is the blind leading the blind, and, you know, instructors giving transitioning veterans horrible advice on what it's going to be like when they transition to the industry, causing them to fail.
It's amazing. I just read Tim Kennedy's book, Scars and Stripes.
Mhm.
He talks a little bit about some of that training. Now, it was a memoir and a lot of the mistakes that he made. And I think he was very fortunate to come out of the military already a UFC fighter. But he talked about the mistakes. So what are the first steps? How do we realize, I'm sure that you've got to actualize the fact that what you were learning in the military is not going to apply to real life scenario. How do you start making that transition?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest lessons you have to grasp. When you're doing your transition training in the military wants to make you feel really good about the exportable skills that you've developed during your active duty time. So their major mission is to make you feel upbeat and positive about your future experience. And by developing this sense of inappropriate confidence, it causes you to trip more significantly, right? And more vigorously and screw up worse. And that's what happened to me. I joined a company into the first issue I had was they said, we're going to put you in a leadership development program. Now, understand that when I joined that company, I'd already served as captain of a submarine and commodore of a submarine squadron. So I've done some pretty significant leading during my active duty career. Mm-hmm. And I could have gotten a chip on my shoulder. I could have gotten upset over the fact that they said I needed to enter a leadership development program, because I would sneer at, the thought that I needed more leadership skills. It wasn't that I needed more, it was that I needed different. Uh-huh. And when I joined that, when I went to that training, I started understanding the kinds of evolutions that I was going to have to go through if I was going to be successful in industry. Just say yes. I was asked if I would be willing to take on a profit and loss position in the company. Most transitioning military folks do something with selling back to the military, not P&L. P&L turned out to be a high risk, high reward. And I just said yes. So I said, sure, we'll try it. And it almost killed me career-wise, because what happened was I started screwing up. I believed that all of these skills that I had developed on my active duty time were directly relatable, transportable to my industry time. And it wasn't until one of my boss's boss decided to call me and say, Bill, you're screwing this up, did I start realizing my eyes start opening, that I was going to have to start paying more attention to what I wasn't doing right.
It's interesting. There's two things that you could take away from what you said. One, as the employer, and how you phrase that, right? Hey, I want you to go to school to get these leadership skills, right? As an employer, if you said, look, I want you to go to school to learn some different skills than what you might already have, it keeps away the offensive remarks, right? Like, hey, you know what you're doing. I need you to go do this. But also on the other side of that, as being the recipient of that request, understanding that maybe that leader doesn't understand how to phrase it for you, first of all, and realizing yourself that maybe although you have these skills over here, they might not apply over there. And
exactly right.
And the schooling could be beneficial no matter how you look at it. It's like reading a book, right? If you get one thing out of that, 250-page book, it was worth it, even if it was one sentence.
Absolutely. And, what I describe as the great lie in the book, about that, what I describe as the great lie in the book is that what I was told when I was transitioning is all your future employer wants from you is good leadership. And, you want to believe that because you think of yourself as a good leader. You've been leading, if you're enlisted, you've been leading since you're 18, 19, 20 years old. And if you're an officer, maybe 22, 23, 24, but still you think, well, if that's all your future employer wants, I've already got that. I'm set up for success. But if you give it 20 seconds of thought, that's not even true in the military. If it was, you could take somebody leading an infantry company and put them on a submarine and they do just fine. In the military, you actually need to know something about the tactics, techniques, and procedures of the unit you're leading. That is no less true in industry. And because it's so different than what you were doing in the military, it's a bit of a longer leap to get to the point where you really do know what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that you are learning skills in the military, but those skills are very specific to what you're being trained to do. And you'll need to acquire skills on top of those skills really to make that transition. One thing that I like, and I was asked in an interview before, I don't hold a college degree and it's no secret, but when I was interviewing for a company that was a part of the requirement, they said, well, that it shows that you have the tenacity to complete something over a period of time. I said, well, I just left a company working there for 12 years and I was the top sales manager in their entire history. Doesn't that show the same thing, right? And I see that and equate that to somebody's military service and time served. So I would imagine that somebody that's gone through the military and has risen in rank does hold and possess those skills to know how to do something, but they have to understand you've got to transfer into the public sector.
That's right. Yeah. And when I talk to companies, I tell them all the great attributes that the transitioning veteran is going to bring the company. And one of the most obvious ones is a degree of fortitude. In the military, we have this expression, embrace the suck. Things really suck, and you need to learn how to embrace it. And companies, are never going to have to worry about that veteran employee not being able to handle what it is they throw at them because they know how to embrace the suck. The other thing is they know how to learn. And in my book, I talk about the most important thing you bring into your civilian employer is an informed passion to learn. Passion because everybody wants to hire somebody with fire in the belly. And veterans have that in spades. Informed because don't forget all that stuff you learned while you're on active duty. Just learn how to modify it, modulate it, adapt it so that you're successful, so you can use it successfully when you make the transition. And of course, to learn. In the military, you change jobs every couple of 3 years. And so you continuously have to learn how to do something new in order to succeed in your military new assignment, your PCS assignment. And that's no less true when you join industry. Your company will know that you're not going to come aboard on day one and understand how to succeed. So they want to know that you can learn. And that I call the informed passion to learn is the one thing that every veteran needs to bring to their new civilian job.
Bill, you're touching on it, and I'd like to play both roles here in this conversation. If you're a veteran and you're coming out of service looking for that job, and if you're the employer looking to hire a veteran, what are some of the things that would create a productive conversation between the two from both sides? As a veteran, what are things that you should be bringing up? And as an employer, what are some of the things you should be asking about?
Well, as a veteran, what I would say is make sure that you start communicating the areas of discomfort from day one. Don't try to hide the things you feel uncomfortable with. When you're on active duty, the mission of the company is of your service, your uniformed service, is very obvious. You know that defending the country is self-actualizing. It's not difficult to understand what that mission is going to be. When you transition industry, a lot of active duty folks kind of have this very naive conception of industry, and they think their mission now is to put money in their boss's pocket. It's not. If you don't get what the mission is of your new employer, make sure you communicate that very effectively so they can help you understand the mission. For the employer standpoint, this is going to sound strange, but I now advise employers to stop saying thank you for your service to their veteran employees. Now, I don't want the general public to stop saying thank you for your service, but when you're an employer and you bring a veteran in and you kind of treat them at a distance and say things like, thank you for your service. By the way, it's a very empty, vacuous statement, no meaning. Then what it does is it starts creating more of a barrier between your veteran employees and your non-veteran employees. And that doesn't help the veteran. It only hurts the veteran. So treat them the way you treat your other employees. Yes, understand their gaps in knowledge that they're going to have to close, but have those hard conversations. One of the things I find non-veteran employers do is because they don't want to have these challenging conversations with the veteran. It's easier just to let them fail. It's easier to not have that direct conversation and say, look, like my boss's boss did with me, Bill, you're screwing this up. He wasn't a veteran, but he knew that if he didn't do something quickly for me, I wasn't going to last very long with the company. That's kinder to the veteran employee than saying, thank you for your service, and then throwing them in the deep end and learning they can't swim.
Right. That's some great advice, because even as we started, I thanked you for your service, and you're right. That could easily be misconstrued if it's an employee and really it's almost like you're treating them like they have a handicap, and everybody looks at it that way.
That's absolutely right. And most veterans will say that to you. They say, well, if they really want to thank me for my service, do something. Don't say something, right? And so take ownership of your veteran success. Companies love to brag about how many veterans they hire, but I ask them, what percentage of those veterans that you hired are still with you after 5 years? They have no idea, right? They have no idea. So if you want to help the veteran, don't say something that is really meaningless, makes you feel good. Take ownership for their success and do something, not say something that's going to help them succeed.
And I would also imagine that putting some tools in place to help that veteran succeed, just as you would anybody else, by the way, but understanding that they're coming from a different background, and realizing that you're going to gain all the value of that background, but you've got to connect the dots for them and provide the tools to do that.
No, that's exactly right. Now, remember, it's funny, I say this and companies say, you know what, I never thought of it that way. It seems so obvious to me. When the veteran joins your company, they're going to be years behind their peers. They're going to be starting out in that company, and somebody who didn't join the military may have 6, 8, 10, in my case, 26 years of experience that I didn't have. And that sets them back. And see, now once they figure it out, they'll accelerate and they'll catch up. But they start out kind of with one hand tied behind their back. And so that's another thing you can help them understand, is how to catch up and how to accelerate.
Yeah. You talked about the passion of these veterans, and I look at it as their drive, right, to excel. It's interesting, and we don't talk about politics on this show because we've got business to talk about, but there is 6 Navy SEALs running for Congress currently. We've got in this state, Ryan Zinke, and I'm watching him bounce around this state, mission driven, you know, and I'm seeing him. And what I think what's great about this exercise is that we're able to watch him on live TV, right? Because he's running for a very publicized office. And I'm watching this Navy SEAL go from town to town and execute his mission. And I'm thinking, wow, how great would that be to have him in a company executing your mission?
Yeah. Well, I've worked with a lot of Navy SEALs over the course of my Navy career, carried them on my submarines. And, there's 2 things they got going for them. Number one, they have embraced the suck. Getting through buds sucks. And so they know how to do that. Number 2, as you said, they're extremely mission focused. Anything that gets in their way between them and the mission, that's going down, whatever it is. They're going to run through it, around it. They're going to knock it over, whatever they need to do to get the mission done. And it's not that they're better, not even that they're better trained than a lot of the other special forces outfits in the U.S. military. It's just that drive and determination. That's really what BUDS does for you, is it filters that out. Well, the military does that to a lesser extent for everybody who's been in the military, much lesser extent. But driving to get the mission done, once the veteran has bought into the mission and they understand that it's a legitimate mission worthy of support, man, get out of their way, because they're going to help you get it done.
Yeah. It's an interesting observation too, as a civilian. And I've said it several times in my life that I'm unsatisfied that I wasn't able to serve. And I think I'm trying to make up for lost time by supporting these causes because I believe in what they do. But, learning about the personalities of these mission-driven veterans, going back to Ryan as an example, he worked for the last administration, and he was asked to do a mission in his job. And I was observing a conversation, and it was interesting because he was asked to do a job. And when that job was done, he wound up leaving the administration. I thought, well, that, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, it seems like a failure, but I was quickly corrected. And that was kind of what we're talking about here, is that he was given a mission and he achieved it. And he's okay with the beyond outcome because he did exactly what he was told to do. And in his mind, it was a success. And I think the reason why I bring that up is it didn't set him back. He's still moving forward, right? And I think that when we see veterans, because of their drive to complete a mission, once they're done with that, they don't get set back. They keep going for that next mission or job or exercise. And I love that about their tenacity.
Absolutely. It's really important to understand when the mission is done, because some people take the mission and turn it into a jobs program. They want to keep doing the same thing forever. But it's okay to say, look, my mission here is done. Now my focus needs to be there. I need to transition. When I decided that, it was time for me to leave the CEO position and focus full time on, doing this kind of thing and helping veterans transition more successfully. It wasn't because I was walking away, from my company that I was CEO of. It was because I believed my mission there had run its course and I had a new mission. And that mission was to help veterans succeed. And so that's what I'm doing now. But you have to be willing to admit when you're done with one before you can move on to the next.
I know we're talking about veterans in this context, but wouldn't it be great if all business leaders or people of power and authority could realize when their mission was done and move on to the next thing, hand the torch down, or realize that they've maxed out, the value that they're bringing, and go on and do it somewhere else? I think that we would see more success in companies and happier leadership across the country, because oftentimes we get to that peak, mission's done, and then we allow ourselves to fizzle out, and then we find ourselves down here going, wow, what happened?
Yeah. He should have left last year, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, I've worked for some of those people, right? You did a good thing, let go.
Yeah.
Let go, move on.
Yeah. And, sometimes, and I think this is good advice for our listeners, sometimes it takes our loved ones to point out to us like, hey, maybe you're done. I started a tequila company back in 2007, and we started with $5 million and we built a beautiful company. But there reached a point where the investors were turning it into something that I wasn't, right? It no longer held my personality and beliefs and the things that I held important to me. And my wife says, it's time. You're coming home and you're not you anymore. Right. And your company doesn't represent your beliefs anymore. And I didn't see that, and I had to listen to her. And thank God I had the courage to do it by listening to her and having her strength behind me. And I left the company, and now I'm better for it. And I hope people can take that as a lesson learned, not only from me, but talking about these veterans. When the mission's done, they're able to move on. And I think that makes us all better.
Absolutely. Yep. But this is my passion now. And, it's just one of those things where, for the veterans themselves, when they read my book, if they have questions, they reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them. Companies, I'm also happy to help companies develop training programs for veterans that will improve their probability of success. I work for free for the veterans. I don't work for free for the companies. Yeah. But that's one of those things. I think that it's really a critical point in time right now in my life. Well, my understanding of business is still relevant, and my understanding of the veteran experience is still relevant as well.
Yeah. There's not enough people out there doing what you're doing. Our vets have given us a great service, and they've helped this country be what it is today. And I don't say that lightly. If all we have to do is look around and interact throughout our day, and we understand that those freedoms that we have. But at the same time, we walk amongst veterans that are suffering in one way or another, whether that's mentally or just physically trying to get to that next step in their career. And I love what you're doing. I love that this is a tool that's out there.
Yeah, and failing to transition to a job that's going to take care of their family, and something they feel comfortable in, is another stressor that adds to the already very stressful experience. I got an email this morning from a veteran who had read my book, and he said, I'm a year into this civilian, and my book only came out in April. I'm a year into this civilian employment thing, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Ah.
And then I found your book, and suddenly I felt better. It's not just me. You had a hard time too. And so he was thanking me for writing it. But the point is, it's going to be stressful for everybody. And we got to understand that, and help people through it.
Bill, I'm going to say something. I'm going to ask for your support on it. I know you're going to give it because it's in line with what you're doing. I heard a speech by Gary Vaynerchuk a couple years ago. He's known as one of the top marketers in the country, Sports Authority. He owned the online wine business. But he said, in speaking of investments, he said, I would invest in a 60-year-old before I'd invest in a 30-year-old. And the reason why is that 60-year-old has the experience of 60 years, right? And clearly they more than likely have the passion. And what I'm looking for your endorsement on is when somebody is a veteran and they've closed that chapter, as you've done, moving into the next chapter of civilian life, and whether you're starting a business or you're working for somebody, it's never too late. You're going to bring tremendous value at whatever age you're at, even if you're 60 plus. And you said it, you wanted to make sure you had another 20 years to give. Could you just give some encouraging thoughts for people that are moving beyond their retirement in the military and what's on the other side of that?
Look, you can have a full career following the military. I did a full career in the military. You could have a second career outside the military. It's never too late. Now, as you approach this, kind of the age that companies think are most people are likely to retire, or you're very employable, but the likelihood that they're going to invest in you decreases with time because they understand they may not get the return on that investment just due to time. But one other point I want to make is that 30-year-old you talked about, a 30-year-old veteran does not equal a 30-year-old never served. And again, this is something that was brought home. A 22-year-old veteran doesn't equal a 22-year-old never served, because that 22-year-old is more like a 42-year-old from the experience standpoint. So whereas I understood what he's saying when he said he would invest in a 60 before invest in a 30, when you're investing in that 30-year-old veteran, it's kind of like getting the experience and the drive of somebody much older because of all that they've gone through.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with you on that because they're in a very intense program for a period of time. I mean, they live it, breathe it, right? Unlike the normal 22-year, I don't care if you even went to college in those 22 years, you still aren't living it and breathing it and indoctrinating what you're being taught like you would in the military. Very good point. Very good point. Bill, the name of your book, one more time, please.
It's From CO to CEO, which is the path I went. Subtitle is A Practical Guide for Transitioning from Military to Industry Leadership. Okay. Available everywhere.
Available everywhere. All right. So get it. I'm sure you're going to find value in that book. Bill, thank you for your time. Thank you for being on this service, the show, and everything that you've done. I'm inspired by what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's show. It is my pleasure and honor to interview all of the guests that have been on the Answer is Yes podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, please go on iTunes and subscribe, give a rating, or simply tell a friend about the show. We also believe in the message of our guests and the positive influence of their stories. As my own mentor and coach, David Meltzer, has taught me, spend some time every day thinking and writing about the things in your own life that you have more than enough of. You will find out how blessed we really are. Please visit my website, livelifedriven.com, for the latest updates about me and what I'm doing. Plus, I post a monthly blog about the many topics on this show. This podcast can also be found there. As I learned early on in life, what you believe is what you will achieve. Thanks, Mark Victor Hansen, and thank you, and have a great week.